You are listening to the Adapt Performance podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance podcast. So before we get into the knowledge, into the stuff that's going to help your training, could you do me a favor? Click on the show notes below and go to our YouTube channel and subscribe for it. So I'm putting out more and more stuff on there. Requested from you guys, actually. They wanted more, or you guys wanted more longer form content that was visual in nature. And obviously, Instagram for the most part is like, look, I've got 30 seconds to try and give you a complex idea. So just a great opportunity to go into depth. Obviously, the podcast is one way, but people want to see some stuff visually as well. So go and follow that or subscribe to that. And then just let me know if there's anything in particular you want me to, do videos about, and I'll do that. So yeah, that is my ask for the day. So what we're going to be doing in today is going through two different topics that I've been speaking about recently with athletes and just generally with people as I get questions. And that's pretty much how my content strategy works, is like, what do people ask me about? Cool. Let's answer that for everybody. Okay. So the first one is proximal to distal sequencing and carries. Okay. So I'm going to basically expand on my point from Instagram the other day, which was that carries are just not worth it for many people, or at least in the way that people do them. You need to be aware of the pros and the cons and that type of thing. I just think they're misapplied and probably overrated. Cool. So the first one then is proximal to distal sequencing, and what this essentially means. Proximal is like center of the body. So when I say proximal, I mean closer to the center. When I say distal, I mean closer to the extremities, down towards fingertips. So for example, belly button, proximal. As you move to the hips, that is more distal. You move to the shoulders, more distal. Elbow, wrist, fingertips, more distal. Okay. In proximal to distal sequencing is a concept it's a biomechanical concept that's been a little bit more popularized by Chris Beardsley. It's been around for a long time. It's something we've been aware of, but it's like something that he's speaking about more and more recently. He's really good. I really like his stuff. He has podcasts, he has Instagram, and he's definitely gained more notoriety recently because he speaks about physiologically heavy topics, and takes it down to granular level to really understand different adaptations that we're trying to create when we chase things like strength or athletic performance in general, which I think is why he's doing really well. He's super smart. But one of the things I got asked about the other day was this concept, right? How much does this actually bear into the way that I program and how I think about things? So let me explain what it is, and I'll talk you through my stance on it. So essentially, the concept is that for a majority of athletic-based movements, so jumping, sprinting, swinging a bat, throwing a punch, okay, it pretty much all starts at the most proximal sector of the body. So we're talking hips and we're talking, the core, okay? So it starts from there, and then because we start to initiate force and energy from that point, we then move that force to more distal segments along the chain, okay? So it will go from the glutes, it'll then go to the knee, it'll then go to the ankle, and then into the floor in the case of sprinting, which, when we think about it from a sporting standpoint, okay, when you get taught to run, it's like whip from the hip, okay? It's like, let's get those glutes going, let's get some extension going. So it makes sense, and we see this in the lab as well. So if you was to get people doing a sprint or a jump, you would see that the hips are the fierce mover in that chain. They are the ones that get everything going. And then there is like a nice little waving in process of the knee joint. And then it's the ankle joint, and then you're through. So it follows a sequence, it follows a flow. And the way you can think about this is like a whip, okay? The whip handle, okay, starts really slow to begin with, but that generates, it looks like a really tiny movement in a lot of cases. But then as you kind of ripple through the whip, it gains speed, but it follows a sequence. And ultimately the second segment is benefiting from the force of the first segment, and then the third is benefiting from the second. So it goes and it goes and it goes. And that is how force transfer happens with the body in a lot of cases. And also, it kind of speaks to this idea that things at the more proximal part of the body, so the core, the glutes, are the most force dominant in terms of athletic movements, because we really need to get things started from nowhere, from scratch, right? We're really trying to build things up from that point. And as you move through, so let's think about it in the case of a punch, right? Boxing coaches in all sports, okay, let's sit into it. Let's twist through. Let's get that extension. Like there's so many cues that sports coaches have used for a long period of time that speak to this. Like we've now just got a concept or a model, a framework that speaks to what coaches have been doing for a long time. But it helps you just get like better synchronicity alongside it, because I do think at times there is a mismatch between where we are with science, either good or bad, and where we are with like sporting movements and tradition and things like that. And they don't always align perfectly, and we're kind of fighting to get us speaking and singing together off the same hymn sheet. So that is essentially proximal to distal sequencing, athletic concept for biomechanics where it starts at the midline, the midpoint, and then transitions out. And obviously, as you transition out, let's say you throw a punch, it starts at the hips. Okay, you're pushing into the floor, it then transitions up the body and ripples through the core. You get some rotation through the shoulder, it then extends, elbow extends, wrist, and then it lands, right? As you go through that, as a result of how human beings are built, the more distal segment, so the fist, weighs a lot less. Okay, it weighs a lot less than the shoulder and of the midsection. Therefore, you have this like smaller mass, so it is going to be able to build up more speed. It is going to be able to really kind of catch wind and go a little bit further. But like I said, it's like a waterfall style of effect. It just flows through the body when things are going well, right? When things are coordinated and we're in a good spot with it. And how Chris Beardsley thinks about this, or how he explains it, is like, because we're at the center of the body, right? And the hips and the core, they are essentially starting from scratch. They are the ones that are initiating the movement. And ultimately, because they're starting from scratch, it is the slowest movement, right? It is the slowest movement. They have the greatest potential to benefit from high force qualities. So essentially, he thinks that the glutes, the core should be super, super strong. You should attack these with strength because they get the movement started. And then as you move to more distal sequences like the elbow, you wouldn't really strengthen the elbow in a max force way. You would be focusing more on the velocity side because it's already at speed, right? The elbow is already moving pretty quickly as a result of the legs and the trunk doing its job. Therefore, strengthening the elbow in the same way we would be strengthening the trunk or the glutes wouldn't be worthwhile, because like in order to really kind of see that transfer between high strength activities, it needs to kind of follow very similar speed mechanics. It needs to be aligned there. So just getting the elbow strong isn't necessarily going to work in the same way. So he's very much about like almost breaking down that of like proximal, close to the body, strength, everything outside of that is more distal. Therefore, we should have more of a velocity focus in order for there to be a transfer of energy properly. A few analogies we've got for you on this one then is, well, actually, let me kind of explain a little bit around the slide. It's going to go pretty heavy, but the sliding filament theory is something we learn in learning before university. I think I learned in my BTEC sport thing. But essentially, when we think about muscle contraction, we go to the muscle fibers. What we've got is a bunch of proteins, right? And how it works is kind of a little bit like Velcro. You've got either sides of this fiber, and they basically hook onto each other. So you've got like this little Velcro sequence. So they hook onto each other, they then pull, and then they hook onto the next one. They pull, they hook onto the next one, they pull. Okay. So we've got this like ratchet strap type of action, but happens at a super, like muscle fiber. So it's like tiny, 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 but that is how our muscles contract and they shorten as a result. Okay. So that is the sliding filament theory. When we think about high force activity, so super slow movements, let's use a back squat, like a 1 rep max back squat, is we're moving a lot of weight, right? There is a high requirement for us to showcase strength. It is really slow because it's super heavy. Because it's super slow, the sliding filament theory dictates like the actin and myosin, which is the proteins, they can grip onto each other and they've got time to unattach, grab the next one, unattach, grab the next one. They've got like a good opportunity to like tug a war this muscle fiber closer to each other. Okay. So they can produce a lot of force. They've got loads and loads of hands on deck to achieve the goal with this 1 RM back squat. You take another example of a jump, okay, similar movement. You can't produce as much force on a jump compared to a back squat because it's a lot quicker. So if we think of it in the case of like the actin and myosin trying to grip onto each other, it happens way too quickly for 100% of those little men to grab on and pull themselves along. It's a little bit more of a rush job. As a result, you might not get as many attachments in that pairing to then pull you along. So it's that type of thing, which kind of explains one of the pieces of the force velocity curve, or this transition between force and velocity. Is like, do we just have enough time to grab and pull? And there is more that goes into it. There is a lot more that goes into it from like a physiology basis, but that's one of the things that might help explain this. And let's go one step further with that. Let's think about, look, if we're starting a movement from scratch, it is hardest at the beginning. Okay, it requires a lot of strength, and then as you build up momentum with it, it gets easier. Let's think your car's broken down. You got three of your mates, and you start pushing the car. Okay, from static is really difficult. You can get like long wind ups. You can really kind of lunge into it. You push in. It builds speed. And before you know it, you are jogging alongside it. So you're not even having enough time on the ground to really extend properly because it's already building. By the time it gets up to, I don't know, 10 miles an hour, your hand's barely on it, and you're just kind of giving it a little bit of a flick, right? You're just flicking it along. That kind of explains this as well. So that's his thing, right? He's about that. He's about, and look, I might have elements of his theory wrong, so don't quote me with this, but this is my understanding of how he speaks about it. So essentially, he is all about, look, get the glutes really, really strong, get the core and rotation in particular, because he's very much a fan of the rotation element. When you're thinking about throwing and sprinting and all that things go along with it. So he would be thinking, let's get hips really strong. So he loves a hip thrust, right? An RDL, squatting variations and rotation variations. That's what he loves. And then everything outside of that is more velocity focused things. So he wouldn't be a fan of you doing calf or that heavy calf work too much, because ultimately the calf is not going to be super responsible for low velocity stuff. It's not going to be like, it's all about fast when you're sprinting. Okay, it's fast. It's not slow grindy, so it wouldn't benefit from as much strength. And also, you don't really want to add any mass to the calves, because then you're just having to essentially whip this thing along, and that's going to have like big effects down the chain. And you're not going to be moving quick if you're carrying an extra kilo of calf. That's exactly why I don't grow big calves. Like, that's always been my thing, I'm like, I want aerodynamic calves. I don't want to fuck up the proximal to distal sequence. I'm aerodynamic. I'm all shin, like, let's bring shins back. That's my concept. Is that a big enough cope? So yeah, with that is essentially where he's at. Problems with this then. Okay, I like it. I think it's really cool. And it works, right? I think it helps you characterize movement. And the thing is, it's not too far away from what people do anyway. Like, it's what sport coaches have been speaking about for the most part. When we think about a majority of programs, we probably all have a heavy hinge. We might have two heavy hinges. You might have a hip thrust, and you might have an RDL. So you've got both the shortened range of motion for the glutes, which is probably more range of motion specific to a lot of sporting movements, because you're extending all the way through to hip extension. Whereas with like an RDL or a straight leg deadlift, the hardest part is at the bottom, where the glutes are the the most lengthened. There we go. Therefore, really good for like hypertrophy and things like that, because you've got long muscle lengths that come along with it. But as you get closer to standing up with a heavy RDL, like getting your hips pushed through is not the hardest bit. You're already way past the hardest bit. Therefore, the transfer probably isn't there as much. So we probably all do a hinge, maybe two hinges. We all squat. So we're probably covering the bases anyway. Where I do kind of disagree a little bit, or think like we need to be a little bit more pragmatic with it and apply this to sport and reality, is I do agree, get the midsections really strong. However, I think just treating the distal segments as only velocity based things doesn't really work, because they're usually the most impacted. Whether that is landing a punch on a bag, that is landing a punch on an opponent, or striking the floor when you are sprinting, there is a lot of impact that goes along with that. So only treating it with this idea of lightweight and fast, I think misses the component of looking. They're speaking through a performance lens. Like I give them credit. Like, but I do think in the real world, with me thinking about, okay, we get ankle injuries, we get Achilles based injuries, we get things that really require us to make all segments of the body super, super strong to resist impact, to make sure that they are strong, to make sure that we don't have weak links in the chain that then manifest in injuries up the chain. Therefore, we fuck the whole system. So I do think, whilst he spoke about he doesn't really program bench presses for boxers, and he has a partner that he speaks with, and they don't really program bench presses for boxers for punch power. Okay, I think more specifically, I agree with that. I don't think there is probably a huge need for that. I don't think that is going to be the power maker of the punch. If you are arm punching and it's all bloody, arm in your striking, it's not great, right? It definitely needs to whip through. But again, going back to this idea of, if you didn't train any of those structures, you didn't train the pecs, the shoulders, the elbows in a strength way, I do think you are missing out on an important part of building a robust athlete that can actually just tolerate training stress long term. So I think I I agree. Like, the long and short of it for me is the concept, the biomechanical thesis of it. Yeah, I agree with 100%. I think get the midsection super strong, do that. But I don't think only do velocity in those outer extremities. I think you also need to do strength in those outer extremities to make sure that you do not get injuries and impact related things. But you probably, from a transfer standpoint, need to make sure you are definitely training those outer extremities with a lot of velocity based things. So you want to be doing pogos and hopping for the ankle, as well as some heavy calf stuff, in my opinion. You want to be making sure that you train the knee with heavy strength based things, but also jumping and sprinting to make sure that it has a velocity focus. You're going up the chain, you want to be making sure that there is a decent amount of fast medicine ball throw based work using throws in general. You got rotation based things, you got explosive press ups pretty high on a box, so it's speedy. Yeah, as well as like your bag work if you're a boxer, or if you are a thrower, then obviously you need to be practicing with your implement or swinging a golf club and that type of thing. So that's my stance on it. I think you do both. You do both, and you just create somebody that's well rounded. Okay. So that's my thoughts on it. I might have bastardized how he speaks about it. So, if he ever ends up listening to this, I do apologize if there is something that is wrong. That was kind of my take on it. I think you do a bit of everything. But yeah, check out his stuff. The next one then is, I put out a YouTube video the other day, which was, it was YouTube and Instagram, about loaded carries. How I think they are overrated, right? And when we're talking about loaded carries, it's farmer's carries. So you've got two heavy dumbbells in each hand. You might have two farmer's handles, which is what they use in strongman competitions. It might be a yoke or a barbell walk. It might be a suitcase walk, a head carry, butcher carry, right? We've got options. There are a lot. Essentially, carrying something from A to B. I think, for the most part, they are just specific to the task. Like, getting better at farmer's carry makes you better at farmer's carry. I don't think it is going to transfer over to any form of real athletic movement that is important, right? And when you ask people, what do carries train? They will say full body. They're a full body exercise. I'm kind of like, cool, but what is it? Like, full body to me means, what structure, what are we actually targeting that is really like receiving the stimulus that we then overload, and we get an adaptation as a result that leads to increased performance. Like, that's what I'm after, is like that question. And full body is like, okay, you're probably just doing a bit of everything, but not very good. I'd rather you not do that exercise that, shags the entire body from a fatigue standpoint. And if it's grip, so this is one of the things people will say, it's a really good grip exercise. And I'm like, cool. So what I need from you then is to go heavy enough in order to receive a grip stimulus, right? Which for most people is, if you're going to do a 20-meter stretch of like a farmer's carry, you're going to need to get some heavy, heavy weight through your hands. It might be that you've got 100 kilo in each hand, so you've got 200 kilo going through the body, all to receive a grip stimulus. I'm like, is there no better option for us to get a grip stimulus than you having to like walk 20 meters, tire out your core, your back, your legs, and all those things? Like, there's simpler ways, there's more efficient sniper-like ways to get that. Grip is probably one of the things that I'm a big fan of for it. Like, I understand that as a concept, but I do think there are better options. People say things like, oh, it's good for core stability. I'm like, cool, what is core stability? Then we've got crickets, crickets, crickets. Oh, it's the ability for you to maintain good core control. What? Okay. Ability to make. So are we coaching that? So when you've got somebody with 100 kilo in each hand and they're going right, they're running, they're doing a really good speed run, because core stability is important to you. You've stated that as like a primary reason for you doing the farmers. There's probably going to be a breakdown, of the core. So are you correcting that when you see a call that's not stable? Are you coaching? Are you reassessing? Are you bringing them back and being like, bro, I need you to be more stable with your core? We're not. Like, is the answer. Like, that is the thing. So it's like, if you set, like, I just don't think, I think it's one of these things that's just been coined as a functional movement, because it's, look, we're not farmers anymore, though. We're not carrying shit on our head. We're not doing, I understand it creates like a farm boy strength feel. we, if you do a combat sport or a contact sport and you've got these people that are like, fuck, you're strong, you're like manual labor strong, I know you've been lifting weird shit for the past 15 years for probably 40 hours a week, you've gained strength as a result, like you are fully a bit of a calloused bro. But I don't know if we necessarily get that from one exercise once a week. Another thing, okay, so going down this route of, I think it's a poor hypertrophy exercise. Like, what is going through a full range of motion? Nothing. Okay, for the most part, it's quite heavily isometric through the traps, and you can definitely build like muscle through those things. You look at deadlifts, like you definitely build a big back doing deadlifts and traps and things. But again, like, would that be my number one option if I wanted to build a big back? No. I just don't. I think there's better ways of doing it. People will say, "Oh, we walk every day. We're just strengthening the gait pattern." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let's go down the same route as with the core stuff then." So are we seeing technical breakdown to a point where the structure is receiving enough overload for it to improve? Like, that is how the body does get better, right? We apply a stressor, it then adapts, and we end up with like this super compensation, this recovery curve that means that we have got better over time. If we're strengthening gait, are you coaching that? Okay, so what is the pattern we want to see? Like, and we're not. That's the thing. And go to suitcase carriers. I guess suitcase carriers are a little bit easier to connect with, because I'm like, okay, there is a clear asymmetry. You've got one heavy implement in one side, a dumbbell, whatever, a kettlebell, and as a result, you're seeing like this forced lumbar, this forced lateral flexion, like you're being pulled to one side. So we can see that there is a clear thing being trained, which is like the obliques on one side, and you can see that people are a little bit wonky with it. What do we want from this exercise? And this is a question to coaches out there, because I don't know. Like, it's a genuine question I have, is what is the correct technical model, in the sense of, we look at a squat and we're like, look, we know for the most part when we do a squat, we want to see that the hips and the knees bend to a point where we are somewhere close to parallel, maybe deeper, depending on your goals. You want to see a straight-ish back, and you want to keep your heels down, right? We appreciate that that is the technical model for a squat. And obviously there's a million ways that you could do things within that, but it's like, those are our anchors. What is it with a suitcase carry? Do we want it to be super bloody heavy to a point where it's really ragging us over and we're really seeing overload? Or do we want them to be walking super robotic, shoulders in line, hips in line, normal kind of walking pattern, but without the shoulders being able to rotate? So now you've taken away gait pattern. You've essentially taken away the ability for somebody to really kind of get into a natural flow where the shoulders move one way, the hips move the other. So yeah, it's one of those. And I just think, look, if it's overload you're wanting of the lateral structures of the core and the hip, stand in place and use enough weight to actually overload those things. Like, so yeah, honestly, like, I don't see many positives to it. And there was a few guys in the comment section that were saying, oh, why are we so scared of fatigue? And it's like, fatigue is one of the things that is going to grossly affect the ability for you to build power, build speed. And with most of the athletes I work with, that is a goal. So us using a super heavy exercise, you need it to be heavy in order to receive a stimulus in most cases, when I think you could get the same stimulus from an exercise that doesn't give you a whole heap of fatigue. Why would you not do that? Why would you go from A to Z when you could literally just go A to B? Why would you jump through 15 different downsides when, oh, here's one. Here's an exercise that does the job, way simpler, way more stable. We get the job done. We don't take up 20 meters of track space. We don't have to unload a fucking farmer's carry thing that's boring. And I say this as somebody like, my sport was strongman for about 3 years. Like, I used to do farmers and yoke and keg carries once a week, every week for 150 weeks, right? I had competitions. Like, I love the sport. I think the sport is sick. But from an athletic standpoint, I don't think it gives you anything, or gives you enough for us to do it. You know, where you would do it if you enjoy it, cool. If you are doing it purely for the enjoyment and you don't mind that there could be better alternatives, crack on. If your job involves it, if you are, in the Navy, in the Army, you are emergency services. I'm not even saying high rocks because you can piss off carrying your 3 kilo kettlebells. I'm joking. High rocks people are people too. If it's your job, right, do it. Okay, there is going to be a benefit there. If is your sport, okay, if you are a strongman, obviously do it. But this is where people say, oh, it's really good for combat and contact sports. I'm like, okay, combat sports, right? Where with you throwing a punch is a carry transferable? Okay, you can argue the grip strength thing, cool, you can get that somewhere else. What else? Okay, grappling. Okay, it's really good for grapplers. Every grappler should do carries. For what? The one match that you're going to have once a year where you pick somebody up and take 2 steps with them. Is that enough to designate enough training time? When again, you could just get it from somewhere else. And again, like, I just don't know. I don't know if it's worth it. Is my thought. And people are going to complain and be like, look, it's just not that deep. Cool. If it's not that deep, it's not that deep. Don't worry about it. If you're not bothered about like having these discussions around optimizing your training and picking exercises that are the most efficient to it, then cool. Like, this is not for you. This is not a podcast for you. But when we've got, people that are wearing Whoop straps and they want to optimize every 1% of this and this and this, it's like, well, if you're going to do that, you might as well at least focus on one of the biggest things you actually have control over, which is what you feed into the body via a stimulus. So, yeah, and I do think the scenarios I would use it again. So we spoke through if it is your job, if it's your sport, if you enjoy them, conditioning circuits. Like, one of the things they used to do at GB Boxing when I was doing an internship, and I think they're still a part of it, is like strongman circuits. Okay, I think it was like a general GPP style circuit, which would involve a mixture of like running and carrying a person and farmers carries and that type of thing, mixed into like some aerobic stuff. So a mixture of aerobic and like body weight and partner style bits. Good general stimulus, good general stimulus where you're doing a variety of things. You're building a base. Like, one of the biggest things at GB Boxing, and for probably most combat sports athletes out there, is S&C training is basically just giving us the ability to withstand a high amount of sports training so that you can become an absolute savage at your thing and cope with the demands. Like, that's what S&C is. So just having a general base is cool. I'm on board with that. I know it's definitely an element of tradition that was kind of built into the culture there. It might not be something that you would do had tradition not been a part of it. I'm not sure. We'd have to speak to the guys about it. But yeah, that's my thoughts, and we can disagree. This is the thing. Like, if you love a loaded carry, you're not dead to me. Like, we can still be friends. I have some of my best mates, and we disagree on training stuff all the time. Sick. Like, you don't want an echo chamber. Like, if I've said something here you don't agree with, cool. Like, it's fine. We can have good, honest discourse, and you can disagree, and we can still go and have a Nando's. Right, we don't have to bloody fall out about it. But yeah, there's my thoughts on it. If I've missed anything, or there's anything you've thought, nah, you know what, Jord, if you thought about this and you present information that genuinely I'm like, oh fuck, I missed that I wasn't even in my consciousness, and knowing that thing and now discovering that thing, I'm changing my mind. I'll change my mind. Like, I'm not going to die on this hill if somebody presents information that's better. Yeah, so there we go. There is a little bit more of a more thought out, not more thought out, just longed it out for 10 minutes. Sick, guys. There's my 2 questions for the day. Or 2 topics of the day. If you've got any more questions or anything that you want me to chat about, stick those over to me. Probably on Instagram is going to be your best place. And then, yeah, going back to what I said at the beginning, if you could get on YouTube, get in the show notes below this, just drop us a subscribe so you see future videos. That would be sick. All right, cool. Speak soon.
Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.